Hi, it's Stu Richards, and thank you for joining us today on our latest Braden Fastcast. Today, we're going to be talking about best practices in email marketing to small to mid-sized businesses, and I'm excited to be joined by Jay Schwartzel, who is a real domain expert in email marketing and other online engagement. So it's going to be a great conversation. While people are logging in, what I wanted to do, if you haven't been part of a Braden Fastcast before, is give you a quick overview of who Braden is and what we do for marketers like these. You can see the logos here, who market to small or small to mid-sized businesses. The quick background on Braden is that we really do two things to help our clients meet their revenue goals in the SMB space. It is either to conduct research to provide insights into the mindset of the small business owner, which can be qualitative, exploratory, for example, doing one-on-one interviews or conducting focus groups, or quantitative, typically online, and that can be, local in a given city, domestic or overseas, to answer all kinds of different questions, as you can see in the second column here, around the business outlook or purchase intent or behaviors and attitudes and preferences of small business owners. And we can conduct that research in a variety of different formats and use a variety of different analytics, ultimately to provide insight to support either business strategy, for example, determining which channels to use to reach small business owners, what messaging they're most receptive to, how to optimize product offerings for them, or to get a sense of the user experience, for example, on your site or app. And we also conduct a lot of research that our clients use for outbound programs. So it might be thought leadership research to develop content marketing programs, which can be supported via email, or developing materials that can be used to support social or content marketing, of course, or even sales and event support materials. The other thing that we do is develop those kinds of materials, and the content that we create can be based on research that we do. So, for example, if you want to create a lead gen or PR kind of program, we can conduct research and develop those assets, or it might be more advisory content in, as you can see, a wide variety of different kinds of formats. But the goal is, at the end of the day, to help you to either understand where opportunity lies with small business owners via research, or engage them via outbound programs such as emails. And one of the things that we've done that combines both is conducting research around the use of email as a way to engage small business owners. So this is kind of a busy chart. Let me explain what's going on here. We did a survey back in September around a whole bunch of different kinds of information sources that small business owners might use when they're researching products and services for their business. And that might mean anything from, a credit card or a loan to a printer to a office space to, HR solution, you name it. And we just said, in this case, specifically drilling down into different kinds of content that they might rely on. At the very first stage of the sales cycle, top of the funnel, awareness of your offerings, we just said, okay, how much are you likely to use each of these different formats? And as you can see at the top, they're very likely to use articles, whether that's on your site, for example, in a resource center or elsewhere online. That's a very popular format, regardless of the size of the company. You can see the blue column on the left. That's what we call very small businesses, those with under 20 employees. Small businesses in the orange in the middle, 20 to 99 employees, and mid-sized businesses in green on the right. You can see, regardless of company size within the SMB segment, articles are most popular. But what's interesting is email newsletters are the second most popular format, that in terms of, again, content. So this doesn't include, search or, things like direct mail or, other kinds of engagement. But in the context of content, email is a very powerful way to drive awareness, whether it's via an email newsletter, which, as you can see, is the second most popular format for very small businesses, third for mid-sized businesses, or a one-off or promotional email. Also, surprisingly powerful way to engage businesses, especially those with fewer than 100 employees. Again, at the very top of the funnel at the awareness stage. Then we said, okay, once you've learned about a product and you're conducting research on it, which kinds of information sources do you rely on? And you can see emails, probably not surprisingly, a little bit less important in terms of, overall, likelihood to use, but still very powerful. So for example, 56% of the biggest businesses, those with 100 to 500 employees, told us that they rely on email newsletters even to conduct research on offerings, which is interesting. You wouldn't think that a email newsletter, which is, by definition, a pretty ephemeral thing, would be a great research tactic, but it really is, in part because perhaps some business owners might be keeping an archive of them, or more likely, when your email newsletter comes across their screen, it might be during the particular period of time when they're researching options. And you have a great opportunity to provide context around the use of your offerings and the benefits of your particular solution. And likewise, one-off email, again, you wouldn't necessarily think that's a great research tool, but it is, especially for the biggest businesses. 57% said that they rely on those to conduct research into your offerings. So they're not just great as a way to keep your product top of mind, or to provide information at the awareness stage, but really useful at research. And then finally, at the purchase stage of the sales cycle, when they've evaluated solutions and they're determining, which particular one to select, you'll see across the board here, utilization of every different kind of format diminishes quite a bit from the research stage, but you can see, one-off emails still pretty important, not in the top 3, but 22% of the biggest businesses say they're relying on one-off emails to make a decision. And then email newsletters a little less so. So probably not surprisingly, their importance diminishes a little bit as you go through the stages of the sales cycle. However, they're still really important, especially for awareness, and surprisingly so at the research stage of the sales cycle. So what I wanted to do at this point is to bring in our expert, Jay Schwartzel, who's the founder of Subjectline.com and the president and CEO of Outcome Media. And for the Q&A section of the conversation, what I wanted to do is to introduce Jay, and first ask you, Jay, if you can tell us a little bit about what Subjectline.com and Outcome Media are, and what you do for clients there.
Sure. Yeah. So thanks for having me. Excited to be here. Outcome Media is my agency. We are about a 100-person organization in South Florida, been around for a long time. And we focus a lot on demand generation efforts. And we do spend a lot of time working with marketers that target small business, mid-market, and of course, enterprise as well. We don't just focus on email. We do direct mail. We do all sorts of different channels, but all about demand generation programs. And because we did so much email over the years, everyone's like, well, what's the right subject line to write? What should we do? And so about 15 years ago or so, I was sitting on my couch. I said, you know what? We should make a tool that uses all of our data about all the email campaigns we send out. And so Subjectline.com was born. It's a free site anybody can go to, and you go there, you put in your subject line, and it aggregates all the data that we have. We do about 6 billion emails a year, and we give a score, how good or bad your subject line is before you send it out based on the current trends. Because the one thing about email, people say, oh, it's legacy, it's dead, it's old, but that couldn't be further from the truth, and it's always changing. And so the site tries to stay up to date with the latest trends and things and tactics. So yeah, it's free. Check it out, subjectline.com.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Yeah, I've tried it. It's great. There's unsolicited testimonial. So I'm curious about your take on, the research data that I just shared, Jay, where the utilization by SMBs of email is, really high at the awareness stage, and surprisingly high rather at the research stage. Is your experience and data consistent with that utilization as SMBs are out shopping for products for their business?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. I thought your research was really compelling, and I love the fact that you broke out newsletters from offer-related emails, because a lot of times people just combine the two, and they're very, very different, things. Your newsletter is hugely valuable, and so are your offer emails, because even though we call them offer emails, by and large, what we're really doing is we're taking the best content that we have, whether that's a checklist, an ebook, a webinar, whatever it may be, and we're packaging it up and saying, here you go, here's the best content that we have. And in the newsletters, we're making a digest of all the best content that we have. So even though, yes, it's an offer, we're asking you to do something. Small business owners, by and large, are very busy. They're wearing 17 hats, right? And they need some sort of way to stay up to date with the most important information that's out there. And these emails that we're all putting out really are the best of what we have to offer, hopefully, and they're not just cold solicitations. And because of that, and what you see in the research makes sense, they're being consumed. And that, is why email is such a valuable channel. So I agree with that, your data 100%.
Yep, that's great. No, and I like that you call out that a lot of marketers see email as, kind of a dead tactic in this age of social media. But we see, and it's not just, small business owners telling that in the research that we do, but based on our own email newsletter and, one-off experience, they really work. It's a fantastic technique.
Well, not only that, I would say that when you look at social media, and I love LinkedIn, I put out a lot of stuff on LinkedIn and all the other social channels, but the problem with a lot of the social channels or even search, they're really rented space. At any point, if I put something out on LinkedIn, right, only a fraction of my network will see it, and I am at the mercy of the algorithms of whatever LinkedIn's decided at that moment. Email really is the only channel where you own your real estate, right? You own the interaction. At any point, you can decide, I want my entire database to get this at this moment, and you can decide what they're going to see and when. There's really no other place for you to do that, which makes email so powerful. And as we get further down this, non-cookie world and all these crazy algorithms and all this stuff, emails become more and more and more critical. So this idea that email's legacy are dead, that's for marketers that aren't using the latest best practices, tactics, tips, trends, things to squeeze all that you can out of email performance.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And yeah, I would love to hear, before we get into the best practices, Jay, what you see as the most common, kind of mistakes or pitfalls that marketers are doing in their B2B email marketing.
I think the most common mistake about B2B email marketing is believing best practices. What do I mean by that? If you go on right now and you Google, spam trigger words or spammy words or things that'll get you to go to the junk folder, you'll see literally hundreds of articles that were written probably today, yesterday, and last week about all of these things that you shouldn't do because you're going to wind up, let's say, in the junk folder with email. The problem with that is, first off, about 20% of all email, especially in the SMB, targeting SMB owners, it will go to the junk folder. I don't care if you're Amazon or Salesforce or IBM, doesn't matter how good of a marketer you are, about 20% of all email will go to the junk folder. So the reason you go to the junk folder, though, is not because of the content. It's not because of the words you're putting in your subject line or using numbers or an exclamation point or a capitalization or any of this stuff in your body copy. That was the case 5-10 years ago, right? And the problem, my biggest issue, pitfall, is that marketers rely on what you see as being promoted as best practices that are out there, when in fact technology has changed. You get filtered, you go to the junk folder because of your sending reputation from a technical perspective and the overall engagement you have with your recipients. It's not because you put the word free in the subject line, which is totally fine to do, right? So those things, I think, are constraining marketers from really being able to use email effectively, because they're relying on information that's being put out there that's really old and legacy data.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so let's talk about what works then, Jay. And what are you seeing, in a fundamental level in terms of list development, especially, a lot of our clients on the financial services side, and especially anyone who's, prospecting in, Europe, for example, super concerned about permissions and also, not just in terms of who they can send to, but how they can segment their list effectively. I'd love to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, well, first of all, we should always be collecting data. I thought it was super interesting in your chart where it showed how the interest level on checklists was even slightly above the interest level on analyst reports, right? And the reason I thought that was super interesting is analyst reports are pretty expensive, right? You want to do a deal with Gartner or Forrester or IDC and send out their stuff. That costs a pretty penny to do that. But checklists cost like nothing, right? You could say, I have no content to promote, which is not true, because you go to your website and you can go to probably any page of your website and say, oh, I can make the 7 reasons why SMB owners should do X, or whatever it is. You have checklists that you could create in probably under an hour just by using content that you already have. And your research was awesome because it showed that checklists were super intriguing to individuals. And the reason I bring that up is, we're talking about data collection. You should have pop-up contact captures when people go to your site, when people leave your site. You should have fixed fielded position on your homepage. People can sign up for your newsletter. But when they go to your site, right, and it pops up that little square and it says, hey, get the checklist on the 7 trends for SMB owners, what they need to know about whatever it is that you're promoting, right? And they put in their email address, you grab their data, and they move on. Some people here listening are like, oh, those are annoying. I hate those. Those are terrible, right? Oh my God, I can't take it. In the history of life, nobody has ever went to a website, had one of those things pop up and said, I'm leaving this site. I can't believe they just had a pop up. I'm so angry, and they leave. No, they hit the little X and they move on with their day. Okay, and they go on to the site. But on average, about 6 to 7% of people actually fill out the form. They get that checklist from you. They go into your database. And the reason I take you through that is, whether it's capture on the upfront or people leaving your site or fixed fielded on your home pages on every page, you want to be capturing that data, getting the permission from the people at that moment, but always be collecting. It's so critical, especially in Europe, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. And yeah, one of the debates we get into with our clients at times is how much information is appropriate to ask for. What's your recommendation, at least for the very first contact?
Yeah, so on average, for every additional must-fill field that you have on a form, you'll lose about 8% of your registrants. That's kind of the number, right? So you have to say to yourself, what do I really need, not what do I really want, and can I get some of this information as time goes on, right? So what you really want is minimal information as humanly possible. You want their email address, you want that permission, you want their geography, okay? And ideally, you would like their company name. I don't think in the small business world it's super important to get their title. Okay, it may be valuable if you are targeting small businesses that are super small. You may want their employee size, but if you're targeting more of 50 plus, 50 to 500, you don't even need that because you can get that data after the fact. Super small, it's hard to find that information on things like D&B or ZoomInfo or whatever because they're such net new companies, right? So depending on who you're marketing to, I would focus on email address, company name, geography is a must, and permission, and then get rest of the information later on because you really don't need it. You just don't.
Yeah, great. And then focusing on obviously a topic that's near and dear to your heart, subject lines. Before someone goes to subjectline.com and tests a subject line, like what are your rules of thumb? Is it still, shorter is better, free is okay?
That's a great question. So first off, I like the fact you're asking about the subject line because so often what marketers do is they come up with the greatest offer. Oh, our creative, it's so beautiful, and now legal approved it, and everything's working. And then we go, well, what's the subject line? Like, oh, I'll spend 3 seconds on it, and we'll send it out, which is super backwards because if somebody doesn't open up your email, who cares? Who cares what's inside your email? So there are little things that you can do in your subject line that can radically increase the number of people that are opening up your emails, your open rate. Okay, so small things. First off, everything needs to be at the start of your subject line. The end of your subject line, nobody's reading. Okay, so your most important things have to be at the start. You want to do things, and it may sound gimmicky, but at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is grab the attention that millisecond when somebody's scrolling through their inbox so they look at your subject line. For example, putting numbers to start your subject line. Right? If you have a checklist, the 7 most important things for SMB owners, a number at the start of your subject line will increase your open rate. The first word of your subject line being capitalized will increase your open rate. Using brackets to isolate your offer, right? So let's say you're promoting a webinar. You put in the brackets to start your subject line, save my seat, in brackets, in capital, and then you talk about what the webinar is, it will increase engagement. Grab that attention right at the start of that subject line is absolutely critical. And then the other things that you can do is tell the person who they are. That works so well, right? If you put in the subject line, just for small business owners. So, whoa, that's me. I'm a small business owner. Or just for small business owners looking for accounting software or whatever it is. You tell the person who they are, okay, they're going to open it up. Just for business owners in the HR industry. Oh my goodness, that's me. I need to open it up. The more that you could tell the person who they are, the more inclined they are to open it. Another great way to personalize like that is using whoever you're marketing to, their company name, right? So imagine I got a subject line, and this may sound a little bit risque, but it says something like, is Outcome Media at risk, with a question mark? Like, uh-oh, that's my company. I better open this up, right? When you see your own company name in the subject line, it says, oh, this is definitely for me. So things like that in the subject line really, really can help to drive engagement, open rates, and that's what it's all about.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, those are great. So on a totally side note, who decided that the subject line quick question or quick questions to is guaranteed to get my attention? Because I get a million of those a day. And it's a kind of a serious question because you do want to avoid being,
Yes.
spammy or just, getting attention for the sake of attention.
Totally agree with you. So you can, in some ways, discount everything I just said to a certain extent. I am not a fan of what you just said, right? So when you said, when subject lines go out, it says quick question. I hate those, right? When subject lines go out and they have the fake reply, the RE colon or the FW colon, and it makes it seem like you're already in a conversation. I hate that. That's totally misleading, right? And what that leads to is spam complaints, really bad interactions, hurts your reputation, horrible. So you want to walk that fine line of gimmicky, which is, yeah, capitalize the first word, make sure you tell the person that, you're talking about their industry, something like that, versus that's fine, versus total clickbait garbage with things like quick question that really, that's the opposite of email marketing. That's literally spamming. So there is two different worlds to live in, for sure.
Yep. Yeah. And are you a believer in A/B testing?
Of course. Maybe every time you hit send is an opportunity to test something, right? If you're not testing something every time you hit send, you're making an absolute mistake. And you need to think about when you're sending out an email, let's say it's not a newsletter, let's say it's an offer. When you hit send, you're hoping something happens. You're like, okay, when I send this out, I hope I get registrations to the webinar. I hope I get my checklist downloaded. I hope people sign up for a free trial or a demo. You're hoping something specific happens. And the reason I say that is you need to think about every link in your message. For example, about 18% of all click-throughs, when you send out an email to SMB decision makers, about 18% of all click-throughs occur on the logo in your HTML creative. In your email creative, about 18% of all clicks are on the logo. I would bet you more than half of the listeners today, your logo is not going to your offer destination page. It's going to your homepage because that's how it was coded, right? You might have social sharing links, like links to your Twitter account or whatever at the bottom of your email. On average, those get about 6 to 7% of all the click-throughs. Who cares if you get a follower? Who cares if somebody goes to your homepage? We need these people doing the thing that you hope they were going to do when you sent out the email. So thinking about every little piece is really essential. And that's how email becomes something successful for you.
Yeah, no, and you actually segued to a great topic, which is copy length. So I'd love to hear your take on, whether it's in a newsletter, like how many articles or elements to tease, or in a, promotional email, what you find is the right amount of copy to send.
That's a great question. And let's separate out the newsletter from offer stuff for a second. So on offer related emails, what's really important is to think about your audience. You have your prospects, people that you really haven't engaged with a lot, but you'd like to. And then you have your database of current customers and people that are engaging with you. Your ability to be verbose with prospects is very limited because they don't care about you, right? You can be a little bit more verbose with your current customers and other people that are engaging because they actually care about what you have to say. So what we see is that in a paragraph, if you have over 75 words in a paragraph going to prospects, performance falls off a cliff, okay? Because they don't care. what you really want to think about doing is breaking out whatever you have to say into short lines of text that are bulleted, fewer words, one big giant hero image. Because like when you get a text message, for example, from let's say a friend or a family member, and it's like a big block of text, you look at it, whoa, I don't have time for that. I'm going to come back to that later because that is something over there. I don't even know what that is. I don't have time for that. It's the same way in email. If you open up your email and you see a block of text, doesn't matter if it says you won the lottery, you're not going to read it because you're like, oh, I just can't, and you move on. So you need to make it super digestible, and you have to make it feel like it's not homework. So whenever you think your copy is tight enough and short enough, I would go back the next day and wipe out even more because that's going to be your best bet for sure.
Right. Good. And do you recommend, with A/B testing of subject lines, do you also do a matrix where you're testing copy length as well?
Yeah, we are, but sometimes it gets hard, right? So you'll read a million things. I'll give you an example that you always want to keep your subject line under 50 characters, right? That's like kind of out there. People buy into that, and that's fine. But ironically, we have a lot of data that shows that subject lines that are over 65 characters, like super long subject lines, do particularly well. And the reason being is less than 10% of subject lines have over 65 characters. So in some odd way, you stand out. Conversely, less than, subject lines that have less than 20 characters do incredibly well because they stand out. It's hard to write a subject line in less than 20 characters that says anything normal. So we look at subject line length, but that's not really the most important factor to us. It's saying the most important stuff at the start of the subject line, and then also leveraging your second subject line, which is your pre-header, which is that gray line of text that you see under the subject line, which is other real estate that you really want to focus on.
Yeah. And do you have a rule of thumb, Jay? Because I'm sure from among our listeners, there are email list sizes that vary wildly.
Right.
When you're doing A/B testing, like, do you typically do 50-50, or do you just 1,000 with your A version and all the rest with the B version? Like, what's the rule of thumb there?
I would tell you it gets hard if your database is small, right? If you have under 5,000 contacts in your database and you go to do an A/B test, that's about the threshold that will be somewhat statistically relevant, whatever the outcomes are. Because when you look at it, on average, you're going to get anywhere from a 2 to a 4% click-through rate, let's say, on whatever it is that you're sending out, right? Mm-hmm. So if you have 5,000 people on your list, you're doing an A/B test, and you have two groups of 2,500, and you're only getting 2 to 4% of those people clicking through, you might have outliers that take you down, the wrong path. So if you're dealing with a smaller database, and of course this is not perfect science, and I'll always get a lot of people, I get a lot of naysayers saying that's not exact, and nothing's going to be exact. But if you're under 5,000 people in your database, I would not really do an A/B test. I would treat each send as an A, the next send as a B, because you don't want to be taking down a fool's path with data that's just misleading because it wasn't big enough. So where you can do A/B testing, where you can't, just do separate testing.
Yeah, okay. No, that makes sense. We're getting towards the bottom of the hour. This is, a great conversation, but what I'd love to kind of wrap up with, Jay, is, what you see as like small changes that can make a big impact.
Yeah, so we talked a lot about the subject line. I think a couple of things that I would focus on. Inside your message, you have call to action buttons, right? Usually the button will be like download or register or whatever. Those buttons are hugely valuable. And what we don't want to be doing is saying things like register or download, because that's you telling somebody what to do. When you have the call to action button, you really state the benefit. Where, let's say it's a webinar, you say, save my seat, or I don't want to miss out. That's literally what the button says. Or instead of download, it says, get my free guide, or get the newest checklist. Say the benefit that the person's going to get. You'll see your click-through rates go up quite a bit. And then when they go to that destination page, wherever you're going to fill out the form, make sure on that page, wherever you're taking them to, that they are trapped. Okay, you don't want to have your navigation bar on that page, because give somebody the opportunity to do something else and they will, and they'll never come back. All they should be able to do on that page is the thing that you're promoting, no other links anywhere else, and have the same primary image that was in your email Have that same hero image be on the landing page as the primary image. Subconsciously, we like knowing that the thing that we just clicked on, that we're in the same spot when we get to that destination page. All of this stuff adds up to really help performance.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Well, Jay, this is great, and I could again continue this conversation for quite a while. But I wanted to thank you very much for all of your tips today. I'm going to go off camera here, but what I wanted to do too is just to wrap up. If you'd like a copy of this deck, for example, Jay's contact information is here. Please just shoot me a note. My email is here, and also in all the probably annoying prompts you got to register for the webcast. But if you'd like a copy of that, or if you'd like to discuss where Braden might bring value to your small to mid-sized business marketing efforts, whether through original research, for example, to generate data for a content program to promote in your email marketing program, we'd love the opportunity to work with you and to help you achieve your SMB insight and revenue goals. But again, if you'd like a copy of this deck, please feel free to shoot me a note. And in the meantime, I wanted to thank Jay once again for being our expert today. It was great info. And we hope to see you again on another Braden webcast coming up soon. Take care.
Thanks, everybody. Let's connect on LinkedIn. Hit me up. Nice talking to you.
Thanks, Jay. Bye-bye.